Everyone wants to learn vocabulary fast, but most people are using the wrong methods. They memorize long lists of words, they read dictionaries, they try to force their brain to remember, and guess what? It doesn't work. They forget the words after a few days, they feel frustrated, and they think, maybe I'm just bad at learning languages. But that's not true. The problem is not you. The problem is the method. Today, I'm going to tell you a method that will improve your vocabulary like crazy. It's simple, it's fun, and it works way better than memorizing random words. I used this method myself, and after a few months, I noticed something incredible. I wasn't just remembering words, I was using them naturally without thinking. And when you can do that, that's when you really start speaking English confidently. So, what's the method? It's called context-based learning. Now, before you say, "What's that?" let me explain. Imagine you hear a new word, let's say exhausted. If you just look at the meaning and move on, your brain won't remember it for long. But if you see the word in a story, in a conversation, in a real-life situation, it sticks. That's because your brain doesn't remember random words. It remembers connections. Think about it. If I ask you what you ate for lunch yesterday, you might forget. But if I ask, do you remember your most embarrassing moment in school? Boom! That memory comes back instantly. Why? Because stories create emotions, and emotions help memory. So, here's how you can use this method. Instead of just reading words, put them into a story. Let's try it right now. Imagine you just learned the word exhausted. Instead of just memorizing, create a short story in your head. Yesterday, I had the worst day ever. I woke up late, ran to the bus, forgot my wallet, and had to walk home in the rain. When I got home, I was completely exhausted. See? Now, the word exhausted is connected to a real situation. You can feel it. Your brain understands, oh, exhausted means very, very tired. And guess what? The next time you hear the word, you won't forget it. And the best part? You don't have to wait for real-life situations to happen. You can create them yourself. Every time you learn a new word, make a mini story in your head. You don't have to write it down, just imagine it. The crazier the story, the better. Now, let's take this method one step further. Another way to make words stick is by connecting them to your own life. Let's say you're learning the word delighted, which means very happy. Instead of just repeating the word, ask yourself, when was the last time I felt delighted? Maybe it was when you got a good grade or when your friend surprised you with a gift. Now, use the word in a real sentence about your life. I was delighted when I passed my English test. Boom. Now, every time you hear the word delighted, your brain will think of that happy moment. And that's exactly how native speakers learn. They don't memorize words, they live them. Another powerful trick? Use opposites. Your brain loves making connections. So why not learn two words at the same time? If you learn delighted, also learn miserable. Now imagine a story with both words. Yesterday, I was delighted because my best friend called me. But today, I feel miserable because my phone is broken. Now you have two words locked in your memory, not just one. And speaking of memory, let's talk about repetition. But not just any repetition, spaced repetition. If you only see a word once, your brain forgets it. But if you review it after a few hours, then a day, then a week, you keep it. That's how your brain decides, okay, this word is important. I need to remember it. There are apps that help with this, like Anki and Quizlet. But you can do it yourself, too. Every day, take 5 minutes to review words you learned the day before. It doesn't take much time, but the results are huge. Now, let's talk about active versus passive learning. Most people passively read words and hope they remember them. But the secret to fast vocabulary learning? Be active. Here's what I mean. Instead of just reading a word, say it out loud. Instead of just looking at a definition, use it in a sentence. Instead of just thinking about a word, write it in a text message to a friend. The more you interact with the word, the stronger your memory. And here's a little hack I used that worked really well. Every day, I picked one new word and made it my word of the day. My goal was to use it at least 5 times during the day. I said it while talking, I wrote it in my notes, I even tried to use it in a joke. By the end of the day, that word was mine. Another fun way to improve vocabulary? Use TV shows and movies, but don't just watch. Watch actively. When you hear a word you don't know, pause, write it down, and repeat it. And here's the important part. Don't just learn the word, learn the whole phrase. That's ridiculous. This way you learn how real people use the word. And the best part? Next time you need to say something is ridiculous, your brain already knows the full sentence. Let's talk about another game changer. Thinking in English. Most learners translate words in their head. But that slows you down. Instead, train yourself to think in English. Start with simple things. If you see a tree, don't think arbre if you speak French, or arbol if you speak Spanish. Just think tree. If you're feeling happy, don't translate it in your head. Just say to yourself, I'm happy. This takes practice, but if you do it every day, your brain will get faster and faster. And soon, you won't be translating. You'll just be speaking. Finally, let's talk about the most important thing, confidence. A lot of learners know words, but they don't use them because they're afraid of making mistakes. But listen, mistakes are part of the process. They are not a sign of failure. They are a sign of progress. Imagine a baby learning to walk. Do they fall? Of course. But do they stop? Number. They keep trying until one day, they just do it. That's how you learn vocabulary. You use it, even if it's not perfect. And little by little, it becomes natural. But I know what you're thinking. What if I forget words? What if I keep making the same mistakes? Listen, forgetting is normal. In fact, forgetting is part of learning. Your brain is like a muscle. Every time you try to remember a word, it's like doing an exercise. The more you try, the stronger your memory gets. And here's something interesting. When you forget a word and then remember it later, it actually stays in your brain longer than if you never forgot it. It's called the forgetting curve, and scientists have studied this for years. That's why reviewing words at the right time is so important. If you review too early, it's too easy. If you review too late, you forget too much. The key is to review right before you forget. So, how do you do this? A simple trick, the 1, 2, 5, 10 rule. Review a new word after 1 day, then again after 2 days, then again after 5 days, and one more time, after 10 days. After that, the word is usually locked into your long-term memory. You don't need to study it every day forever. Just review it at the right moments. Now, let's talk about something powerful. Your environment. The words you see and hear every day affect your memory. So why not surround yourself with English words? This is what I did. I changed my phone's language to English. I put sticky notes on my walls with new words. I followed English-speaking pages on social media. I even changed my YouTube recommendations to English channels. And guess what? I started learning without even trying. I wasn't studying vocabulary. I was living it. If you see a word enough times, your brain automatically remembers it. So, why not make sure English is everywhere around you? Speaking of environment, let's talk about real conversation. The best way to remember words is to use them in conversation. But I know not everyone has an English-speaking friend. So, what can you do? First, talk to yourself. I know it sounds strange, but trust me, it works. Every morning, describe what you're doing in English. I'm making coffee. I'm really tired today, but I have a lot of work to do. This forces you to use the words you know and search for the words you don't. And guess what? If you need a word and don't know it, you'll remember it next time because your brain will say, hey, I needed that word. Another trick, Write short messages in English every day. Even if it's just a note to yourself or a social media post, the act of writing forces your brain to organize words, and that's one of the best ways to make them stick. Now, let's go even deeper. Have you ever noticed that some words are easier to remember than others? That's because those words are connected to things you already know. For example, let's say you learn the word cozy. Instead of just memorizing it, think about what makes you feel cozy. A warm blanket, a cup of tea, a fireplace. Now, when you hear cozy, your brain doesn't just see a word, it sees a feeling. This works for any word. If you learn delicious, think of your favorite food. If you learn adventure, imagine your dream trip. This method connects new words to things that already exist in your brain, and that makes them much harder to forget. And here's another thing that makes learning faster: learning words in groups. For example, instead of learning just happy, learn excited, cheerful, overjoyed, ecstatic. Each of these words has a slightly different meaning, and by learning them together, you also learn how to use them correctly. Let's try another instead of just big, learn. Huge, massive, enormous, gigantic. Now, instead of using big every time, you have 4 new ways to express yourself. This is how you sound more natural in English. You know the method subscribe.